Everybody, welcome to the Parsley event we're hosting for Ann here, our friend. This is a very lovely book. It combines poetry and gardening and very cute dogs. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. The illustrations are great. The poetry is super fun. And yeah, Ann's got to talk for you. She's going to talk to you about poetry, gardening, and we've got a bunch of fun stuff. We can plant parsley over here. We've got a bunch of activity sheets. And then afterwards, we're going to have her read the story, maybe take some questions, and then, yeah, sign your books for you. Without further ado, here's Ann.
Isn't Chaucer's great? Let's hear it for Chaucer. What would this city do without Chaucer's? So, all right. I am Ann Lewin-Benham. I am 82 years old. Across my life, I have been a child, an avid reader, read to all the time by mother, father, grandfather, aunts, cousins. So I grew up listening to words. Wonderful words read by people whose diction was beautiful. And that's a great blessing. I feel it all the time in my work. So I have also run and founded schools and trained teachers and taught in the classroom, what I call Fanny on the floor work for many years. I don't know if the Fanny will get off the floor at this age, but that's another thing to find out. Anyway, now I'm writing books. That's my main occupation. And I thought I would start off, if you will bear with me, with some really recent research on the importance of poetry in children's life. This is the work of Stanislaus Dehaney, who is a foremost neuroscientist of our time, works with his wife, and they have looked at the brain of preemies, of children who are born premature in operation. And from that, they have learned that melody and rhythm and sound have a vital impact even as young as 2 months in utero. So I am pushing poetry and pushing good poetry that has very strong meter and very strong rhythm and rhyme, and I'm going to get into that in this talk. I do have an outline here, if anybody is interested in following along. The first picture on the outline is not my son, but it could have been. This is my son. Yes, thank you, sweetheart.
Do you want these back? Or?
Yeah, I will need these back. So he was 6 months old and sitting up for the first time, and there was a sunbeam on the floor, and he was reaching for it, and it inspired my first poem for children. I was 21 years old at the time, and it goes like this. Baby sees and reaches for a beam of sunlight on the floor, tries to catch and tries to clasp, but smiling, it eludes his grasp. He's too young to understand you can't hold sunlight in your hand, and while his busy fingers play, the sunlight blinks and slips away. So that was the first, and has gone on to many others, but Parsley is the first one to get published, so it will always have a special place in my heart. What I want to emphasize today are a few things about poetry and why it is so important in children's lives. And I hope you will read along or chant along or clap along or shout along with me as we go through each one of these things, because the first thing I'm going to talk about, after I have another sip of water, since it's warm today, is rhythm. And I've chosen a traditional Mother Goose rhyme to talk about rhythm. So, will you do Hey Diddle Diddle with me, please? Loud? Okay. Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The little dog laughed to see such sport, and the fish ran away with the spoon. Great, you're great. All right, anybody want to call out a different Mother Goose that you'd like to do this to?
Jack be nimble, Jack be...
Well, right, let's wait. Great, come on, lead us in it, Chaucer. Ready?
Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jumped over the candlestick.
Great. Great. Another one. Anybody?
Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again.
You're great. So rhythm is vitally important as a factor in children's learning and mastering language. That is the first point there. Now, of course, so is rhyme. Hi. I think the young man sees something he very much wants. So this next one, every time I have tried to read it, I have stumbled over it. It's an Ogden Nash, and his words are so beautifully twisted up in rhyme. So let's read it together, and I'm going to suggest that we read this pretty slowly. Rhyme means when any two final sounds at the end of two different lines are the same, sound the same. So, a flea and a fly in a flue were caught. So what could they do? Said the fly, let us flee. Let us fly, said the flea. So they flew through a flaw in the glue. Can we take that a slight bit faster? I don't know that I can, but with you helping, let's do it a slight bit faster, okay? A flea and a fly and a flue were caught. So what could they do? Said the fly, let us flee. Said the fly, let us flee. So they flew through a flaw in the flue. Thank you, Ogden Nash. I usually don't get tripped up. Okay. So, the next thing that I want to talk about is the pictures that words make in our brain. And I'm going to do that with one of my favorite poems. Do you all know Eugene Field's Winkin', Blinkin' and Nod? Do you all know that it's a song? All right, if you'll put up with my voice, I'm going to sing it to you, and whether I can hold it up and read the words and sing at the same time, we're going to find out in a minute. So, let me get into voice here. Winkin', blinkin' and nod one night sailed off in a wooden shoe. If you know it, you're more than welcome to sing with me. Sailed on a river of crystal light into a sea of dew. Where are you going and what do you wish? The old moon asked the three. We've come to fish for the herring fish that live in this beautiful sea. Nets of silver and gold have we, said Winkin', Blinkin' and Nod. The old moon laughed and sang a song as they rocked in the wooden shoe. And the wind that sped them all night long ruffled the seas of dew. The little stars were the herring fish that lived in that beautiful sea. Now cast your nets wherever you wish, never a fear are we. So cried the stars to the fishermen three, Winkin', Blinkin' and Nod. All night long their nets they flew to the stars in the twinkling foam. Then down from the skies came the wooden shoe, bringing the fishermen home. 'Twas all so pretty a sail, it seemed as if it could not be. And some folks thought 'twas a dream they dreamed of sailing that beautiful sea. But I shall name you the fishermen three, Winkin', Blinkin' and Nod. Winkin' and Blinkin' are two little eyes, and Nod is a little head. And the wooden shoe that sailed the skies is a wee one's trundle bed. So shut your eyes while Mother sings of wonderful sights that be, and you shall see the beautiful things as you rock in the mystery sea, where the old shoe rocked the fishermen three, Winkin', Blinkin' and Nod. Somehow that always makes me cry. It's such a beautiful poem, and it's also a lovely song. So, all right. Now, there's one thing that I didn't tell you about in this poem, and that is that words like this, like those Eugene Field wrote in this and many of his other poems, make you see images. And if I were to read just a couple of stanzas of this again, and you were to close your eyes while I read that, if you see an image as I read that, put your hand up, because this is a very, very important thing for young children, is the images that they hear in the words that are being read to them. So, all right, close your eyes, and I'm going to read just a little bit. Winkin' and blinkin' and nod one night sailed off in a little shoe. Sailed on a river of crystal light into a sea of dew. Where are you going, and what do you wish? The old moon asked the three. We have come to fish for the herring fish that live in this beautiful sea. Nets of silver and gold have we, said Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. The old moon laughed and sang a song as they rocked in the wooden shoe, and the wind that sped them all night long ruffled the sea of dew. The little stars were the herring fish that lived in that beautiful sea. Now, cast your nets wherever you wish, never afeard are we. So cried the stars to the fishermen three, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. I'm going to skip to the end here. Winkin' and Blinkin' are two little eyes, and Nod is a little head. And the wooden shoe that sailed the skies is a wee one's trundle bed. So shut your eyes while Mother sings of the wonderful sights that be, and you shall see the beautiful things as you rock in the misty sea, where the old shoe rocked the fishermen three, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. How many of you saw images? Oh, yes, thank you, Eugene Field, and any great poet for doing that. All right, then, another great American poet is Carl Sandburg. And the point that I'm going to talk about here is alliteration, which means the same sound again and again and again and again. So first I'm going to read you his poem, and then I'm going to tell you how many times the s or s sound occurs in these very few lines of poetry. It is called Summer Stars. Bend low again, night of summer stars, so near you are, sky of summer stars, so near a long-armed man can pick off the stars, pick off what he wants in the sky bowl. So near you are, summer stars, so near, strumming, strumming, so lazy, and strumming. There are 24 times that the s sound is used.
What, can you tell the difference between alliteration and assonance?
No, I can't. Tell us what it is,
I
please,
think
Jocelyn.
assonance is certain consonants, especially S's and schwa sounds, whereas L's and B's and M's are alliteration.
Thank you. That I didn't know. There are so many.
I think.
There are so many aspects to poetry that we could fill hours talking about each one, especially if we have an expert here on assonance and alliteration, for which I thank you. So in parsley, which you're going to hear soon, the p sound for Peter in parsley is repeated. There's a refrain that runs through the book, and I'm going to tell it to you just so that you can hear all the p sounds in the refrain. Peter pulled up my parsley, my curly parsley. He must have thought it was weeds. Peter pulled up my parsley. He pulled up my parsley indeed. I think there are about 7 or 8 sounds just in the refrain, which repeats several times in the book. All right, so another Carl Sandburg, another swallow of water first. Another Carl Sandburg, something he's so good at is metaphor, and I'm sure you all know this by heart. I can see Jossie nodding, so you can say it right along with me. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches, and then moves on. how much he says in so few words. Yes, I think that's. I mean, you can read that to a very, very young child, and just whether even if they don't know the words harbor or haunches or any of those words, just hearing those words again and again will put them in mind when they do see images of them. Okay, which brings us to Parsley. I must tell you that I've probably written 100 story poems for children. Most of them I wrote in the 1970s. It was a difficult time in my life, and I just buried myself in writing poems, and there they sat in a file drawer, and at the age of 82, I said, well, if I don't get something published now, will I ever get anything published? In the way of poetry, I've had 6 textbooks published. But it was a learning curve, let me tell you, to self-publish a book from here to there, and I'm not even sure where there is yet, because it was a very difficult process. I found an offshore printer, which took me about 3 months to screw my courage up and say, how do you find an offshore printer? But as it turns out, the printer who printed this book in China did a wonderful, wonderful job. I couldn't have been more pleased. My illustrator, Karen, has illustrated books for about 10 authors. She said she is exhausted with the process, and she's not going to illustrate anymore. She's going to go back to her passion, which is fine arts and painting courses. So I have lost Karen as an illustrator, which is too bad, because the next book I want to publish is also about a schnauzer, a very, very different schnauzer than you'll meet in Parsley. So, but we'll have a new illustrator. So Karen had wonderful little touches in the book, like the end papers, which you don't always see. All my books as a child had end papers in them, and that was Karen's touch, and she did a beautiful, beautiful job. So I have dedicated this with loving memories of Florence Regina Levy-White, my mother, who studied elocution, studied for the stage, went on the stage at a very different time in the history of this country. And from the day I was born, she read poetry to me. And it's dedicated to my father, Albert White, who chose many of my early books. I have virtually my entire collection of childhood books. And in them, my mother has inscribed, "With love to Ann J. from Albert," my father. So that's very, very precious to me. And this book says first edition, first printing, but the one that the printer is working on now is going to be first edition, second printing. So that's pretty exciting. So here we go. You've heard the refrain. Peter pulled up my parsley, my curly parsley. I grew my parsley from seeds, but Peter pulled up my parsley. He must have thought it was weeds. Now, before I go any farther, does everybody know what these are? Can anybody name this flower?
Is that a color?
Yes, yes. Gabby made these for us because one of the first people who read the book came to me and said, you know, you have a word in that book that I don't know. You have a plant, and I have no idea what that plant is. And I had to go back and read the word. I had no idea what he was talking about. But crocuses are a northeastern flower. They come up through the snow before the snow has melted, and they tell us that spring is really going to come. So I said, Gabby can do anything, by the way. I said, Gabby, do you think you could make us some crocuses? So this is for people in the West who may never have seen a crocus. Thank you, Gabby. Oh, that would be great. Yeah, thank you. Danny's going to look up at Danny's nice tall arms, because that's a lot easier. So, impatiently I waited for the cold, which was belated, to depart. Then the crocuses were done, so I knew the time had come to start. I chose a level place rich with worms and lots of space and sun, and worked it with a hoe, back and forth and to and fro, till it was done. But Peter pulled up my parsley, my curly parsley. The package said guaranteed, and Peter pulled up my parsley. It must have looked like a weed. I made furrows not too deep, and the dirt lay in a heap beside each row, and every row was straight, where the seeds would germinate and start to grow. Then I spread them in, not too thick, not too thin, and one by one, I pushed the dirt back on and gently tapped it down, and I was done. But Peter pulled up my parsley, my curly parsley I'd been so careful to weed. Yes, Peter pulled up my parsley. He pulled it up indeed. Each morning I ran out to see if any sprout was there, and as the days got hotter, I sprinkled lots of water everywhere. The days were very slow. My seeds would never grow, or so it seemed. Then, one day, there they were, very small, but very sure, and green, tender little things on skinny little stalks with wings. Imagine that looks like wings to a little child. Each day the plants would rise, and right before my eyes they grew, a green and curly bed, just like the package said they'd do. The stalks were very thin, but leaves were filling in, not like the tiny bunch they'd been, and I had never seen anything that looked so green. I looked at them all day. When Puppy said, "Bow wow, let's play," "Not now," was all that I could say. Waiting time was past. In no time, just a glance showed full and bushy plants, no longer very small. My parsley plants were thick and tall, growing up so high, I wondered if they soon might touch the sky. But Peter pulled up my parsley, my curly parsley, that grew so high and so strong. Yes, Peter pulled up my parsley. Did he know he'd done wrong? Then Daddy came to look, and Mommy even took a sniff to give the salad texture and just a little extra zip. But Peter pulled up my parsley, my curly parsley, and dinner soon would be on. I ran to cut some for Mother, but all my parsley was gone. Parsley, my curly parsley, was strewn across the lawn. The greens were widely scattered everywhere all about. What happened to my parsley was all that I could shout. Peter had pulled up my parsley. He was sitting on the bed, and all around Peter was parsley, even on Peter's head. How many of you guessed that the dog had done it? How many of you had guessed that the dog had done it? Of course, I saw two hands and heard one, of course. Some people don't.
A puppy? I mean, anyone who's had a puppy would know that immediately.
So that's it. And the last 2 pages in the book are planting instructions. And then we've put 16 pages so far. 16 pages is